The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on EH&S Program Gap Analysis. My name is Sasha and I will be your moderator for today. Before we get started, I want to give you a brief overview on what today's webinar is going to entail, as well as a short introduction for our speaker. Today's webinar will start with a slideshow presentation by our in-house expert, Mike Albert. This webinar will teach EH&S professionals how to perform a gap analysis on their existing programs, as well as determine the best practices for improvement. Specific topics addressed during this webinar will include how to determine what resources your organization needs and how they should be used to drive the most improvement, best practices for getting those resources on a limited budget or with skeptical management, and tactics for designing and implementing new plans and programs. At the end of this webinar, there will be an open Q&A. You can ask questions by typing them into your chat pane on the right where it says questions. So just to kind of reiterate that, nobody needs to raise their hand, no one's mics will be turned on or anything like that. You can just type the questions in and I will ask them to Mike and he will give you an answer. All unanswered questions will be answered and sent out in an email after the presentation. So if we don't have time to get to your question, don't worry about that. We will send you an email and answer you then. In addition to the questions, all attendees will receive a recording of the presentation and a copy of the deck used today. Today's speaker, Mike Albert, has worked at Triumvirate Environmental for over 6 years and currently holds the title of Onsite Services Operations Manager. One of his specialties is managing the Onsite Support Program, a program that focuses on finding and filling in EH&S program gaps for our clients. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Mike.
Sasha, thank you very much. I appreciate the introduction to going forward. So today, with our vast experience of understanding gap analyses and really potential improvement tactics that can be used directly today, a lot of programs out there are good. They pass inspection. Everybody feels really good about it. But even some perfect programs do have some small gaps that we've found over time that can definitely be adjusted. It's very few cases that an inspector will be able to walk in or an agency will be able to walk in and walk out with actually no problems going through it. There's always some good constructive feedback or criticism moving forward. So definitely, there's some definitely good take-home advice in here and some quick examples of exactly what you can do when you walk out of here to go perform your own miniature gap analysis and figure out what you could need or what you could want moving forward. I want to stress that this is an overview. This is not an in-depth gap analysis that dives into every little nook and cranny of your program. I want to be able to hit on some of the more common and more recent errors and issues that have been found through inspections and through what we found out through our local, state, and federal agencies as well. Our biggest point is that it is really great to know your strengths, but it's better to know your weaknesses and ultimately fix them. Without fixing them, you're leaving your program open for a compliance issue, a compliance fine, or a write-up in the newspaper, which is probably the worst thing that anybody could actually think of, because then it causes damage to your actual business. No matter if you're a biotech, a life science place, a healthcare institution, or even a university located almost anywhere in the U.S., you're going to find a couple little problems, a couple little gaps, and you're going to want to be able to fix them quickly and easily. Today, we're going to aim to really focus on what you can do and what you can offer your company moving forward. A lot of different agencies, a lot of different programs are out there that I'm going to touch on just a few of them. Some you can see up in the little cloud right there between the biological, best management practices, bloodborne pathogens, stuff going down that route. The radiation safety, between knowing what your radiation safety officer should know if you have radiation on your site, if you do not. And then overall efficiencies of the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, and that's at a federal level. And always remember that when you go down to a state level, rules are going to probably be more stringent. And today it covers everything. You can use this whether you're a startup, brand new company right off the market, someone who has been in business anywhere from a year, a couple months, a couple hours, depending on what's going on. If you're a small EH&S program, if you only have a couple people within your program, if you yourself are the only person actually working with your program, which is very common, not something uncommon by any means, or if you're a very large program, you have upwards of 5, 10, I've heard of some programs going up for 20, 25 people, which is, for some people, oh my gosh, this is wonderful. I have so much resources, I have so much to do, and we can really dive into it as a team, which is really good to have. But strictly here, we're looking at just the overview. So something as a large EH&S program, we might not go too in-depth about everything that you're going to want to look at, but this covers a lot of the basics that you should look for. Understand that a lot of top talent gives you the top results. You're not going to go out there and pick up your friend that wants a job and say, hey, let's do this environmental thing together. No, you want to know what's going on and what's going out there, and you want to make sure that you put the right people in place. If it's a consultant, if it's inside, if it's outside, you hire someone inside, it's great. Also, a lot of people out there, which I think is wonderful, is you have the great background, great experience, great knowledge, you go to school, you get all these extra little webinars, you get a little white paper here and there, and you're thinking this is great. This is just my little brush up. Or, why do I need something like this? But like what I said is knowing what you need and ultimately when you need to do it. There's a lot of little things that change, processes change, so I'm going to talk about that, really go into depth about what's going on. Is there something that you're missing? Is it hard to fix? Is it easy to fix? Let's really start diving into that and understanding what's going on out there. So with this, I'd like to ask a poll question through everything is, how many times do you run into a roadblock and need external sources to really help you out? The poll is open. You can go in and answer any questions from 1 through 5. This is strictly just, where do you stand? Let's be a little honest with ourselves. How often do you come up with a situation and a problem with a person, with a chemical, with anything, an emergency response that's out there that you might not know what to do with right away? These are very common things that you could run into and situations you can run into that you need extra help for. So we're looking for just a quick little answer, seeing what's going on out there. And also, are there any other constraints that come into play when you need more information? And we're going to go in today a little bit about budget and money and talking about how little money everybody has, and we understand because of the constraints over the past 6 to 7 years about trying to lower budgets as well.
All right, great. Thanks everybody for answering the poll. It looks like the most common answer by far is 2 times a month or less. So thank you guys. I'll turn it back over to Mike.
Thank you, Sasha. So definitely moving forward, benefits of this gap analysis is knowing where you're strong. You got to know where you're strong and what's going on. You feel very confident in your waste disposal, in your Clean Air Act admissions and HAP reporting. You feel really, really good about that. That's excellent. You should feel good about large parts of your program. On the other side, understand where you're vulnerable. These cases where state inspectors will come in and find these little cracks and crevices within your program and just go, what about this? Am I going to fine you for it? Am I going to cite you for it? I don't know about this. And then can you provide the actual answer that could help support why you're doing it and what's going on? Understanding new regulations. Regulations are constantly updated, anywhere from monthly, yearly. There were some recent webinars that we did that it took 3 to 4 years to actually go through and get a regulation passed. And there's a lot of public comment. You should definitely look into being able to publicly comment on things federally and through the state. There's open comment periods that you can look through, but actually understanding the new regulations and how it would apply to your processes within your own site and in your institution. And of course, everybody wants to talk about money. The budgetary restraints are huge in a lot of cases. It almost doesn't matter what you're doing. There's always a money cap. Usually it's lower than what you want. And a lot of places out there can help you work with that, understand it, and not just walk in and walk out without doing just the bare minimum, but doing as much as possible. And then also, what and who are out there to help? There's a lot of different resources out there, including the via internet and the web. It all just bases on who you trust, when you trust them, what's going on out there. Classic example is Wikipedia, that we all should just go to Wikipedia and just look at that, but ultimately that's not a good answer. A lot of cases you got to consult the Regency websites, the federal websites, and the state websites to actually look and find out what's going on, and then to interpret what you're reading is an entirely different level. So we're going to cover all these throughout this process. So what we're going to look at is finding the gaps, how to complete a basic gap analysis to identify some of the issues and what you can see in your program. Secondarily, we're going to look at the budget. Where do you stand to do this type of work? What can you do? What don't you want to do? And so on and so forth. And then also what you can do right now, the immediate tactics that are going to help you either identify 1 or 2 things or 4, 5, 6, 7 things, depending on what's going on in the education experience as well. So first, we're going to go through looking at these gaps, finding them. So let's start with the basics. Let's really look into what you should be asking yourself probably every other month, every other week, depending on what's going on. You know, what do you do currently to stay in compliance? How is your people, are they trained properly? What are you doing routinely? Routine is a very good word because it means things are being done on a specific time frame and in a range. However, as we all know, when routines get a little boring, you might miss something once in a while. So how do you stay in compliance and what can you do? And then touching on the training point, who does it? Is it an employee at a completely different level that you've tasked this with and you need to just guide them, check up on them, follow up with what they're doing? There's a lot of different projects going on where you might be over your head with what's going on. You might be underwater, I should probably say. And these trainings that these people have to go through, you fall out of date. You can go through updating them and knowing what's going on. And then documentation. Documentation is probably 99% of the game at proving something is done and how it is done. Writing up SOPs, procedures, best management practices are huge on what's going on. And then how often? Like I mentioned before, follow up, checking in, making sure it's there. So when an inspector comes in, do you know who to go to and when to go to them to actually get the information that they need? Then, is there a reminder? We have so many things to do all the time. And I get it, you get it, it's all there. Is there a reminder? Is the Outlook calendar the source that you always use? I got to update this permit, it's coming up. What if Outlook changed? What if something was in the background that you weren't sure of? What if you can't find a document? What can be a reminder to be used and where everything is located? And then ultimately, does it need to be done? Are you overdoing it in some cases, or are you underdoing it in some cases? These are some little things that you should definitely ask yourself to see where you are and see where you're at. So common program gaps that we see, a nice little pyramid here of a lot of things that can go good, that can go bad, but ultimately on the bottom you have all your emergency response and emergency planning, contingency planning. Depending on how big your site is, this is stuff that you got to make sure you keep updated. Do you have the right trained personnel on there? Is there an updated plan? Are these plans constantly updated yearly, biannually, every 5 years? You got to make sure that everything's up to date. Safety of people's environment is almost as big or even potentially bigger than talking about your emergency response. You know, documenting incidents. There's a lot of cases where EH&S personnel have to document cases that have to be filed with OSHA and have to have major incidents, root cause analysis, theories and thoughts, and actually digging in the investigation behind it to make sure that it won't happen again, being preventative in the future and making sure that the employee is okay moving forward. You have your permits. All the little pieces of paper that say you can do what you said you were going to do. Are they up to date? Are they accurate? Do they need revising? This goes anywhere from all the way up into the air to down below in the water to the waste going out the door to chemicals coming in the door. And speaking of chemicals in the door, your inventory. Per OSHA and the Hazard Communication and Compliance Standard, is it active? Do you have an active inventory that you store chemicals, and you have your medications if you're a hospital location? All that kind of stuff needs to be inventoried. Is it active? Is it not active? Is it an Excel sheet from back when Excel was first written back in the 80s? Is it on a piece of scrap paper just in the back closet saying inventory, here it is, and it hasn't been done in over 20 years? Stuff to think about. And then also a small portion of it, but it's a big portion when you really dive into it, is the waste. Your municipal trash, your recyclables, your chemicals, your biologicals, so on and so forth. There's all these different programs and all these different regulations guarding it. So who's doing it? How are you training them? And what's actually going on? Some of the common compliance gaps that we see out of it is that with your emergency response and contingency planning is the training and the correct equipment all up to date. Training has been a huge thing that we've run into where employees run out of date with their training, whether it's every year, every other year, every 3 years. People and their names on these lists need to be trained to know what to do. We've seen a lot of cases where there's a lot of acting, a lot of preparation, a lot of, hey, we're going to run drills. We're going to make sure everybody knows what's going on. These are required for certain commissions. I know, for instance, like in the Joint Commission, they require a lot of drill running and making sure that things are up and running, accurate between your fire alarms, who's doing what, how to evacuate buildings. And this applies to almost any industry out there. Fire is one of the biggest root causes of having issues within your facility and how safe you are. And then also with the safety of people's environments, can you look to prevent something before it happens? We see in a lot of cases that when there's an incident, a chemical spill per se, that happens in a lab, you can think of anything that happened way out in UCLA where there was an explosion. Recently, there's been some other biotech research explosions where they've been working through chemicals and it just explodes and there's an issue. So how are your SOPs updated? What chemicals are you using? And what are the hazards you're putting your employees at risk of actually doing? And not only thinking of the employees, but what about the public? A lot of institutions and sites out there, you have public interaction. Everybody thinks hospitals are the only ones, but it's not. Between biotechs and universities and industrial manufacturers, public can get in and out pretty easily sometimes. How's your safety and security? Little things like that to definitely start thinking of. Permits, is there a renewing schedule? Did a process change? Did you have one of the most common problems is either mercury or high organics in your wastewater? Did a process change where you tested and found something out and found you have high levels of mercury and something has to change, or you're going to get cited for it? Or are these permits just out of date? You're producing more, another building went up, all these things that go into it as well. Your inventory, like I mentioned before, does it exist on a piece of paper, or is it something that's really up to date? There's a lot of really good programs out there. We just recently did an inventory webinar where it goes over some of the most common inventory programs that are out there to help you meet this standard and meet the challenge of collecting this inventory through your site. And then also your waste. Did a process change? Is there more sustainability in recycling? Are you trying to recycle paper more often and cardboard and plastics in one way? And are you training the people well enough to do it? Did anybody have an incident where potentially the wrong waste stream ends up in the wrong end disposal? For instance, a lot of cases where either biologicals or radiation ends up in the regular trash. Not always on purpose, but by an untrained employee, someone misthrowing something into a trash receptacle, unfortunately, and it ending up in the wrong place. A lot of different cases end up where it ends up in a trash compactor, goes up to a transfer station, and then actually gets caught there and then brought back, and you can handle it moving forward. So a lot of cases it gets handled and caught before it actually happens, but still, it's something to be wary of. A tip that I like to give a lot of people is actually look at your documents that you need. Don't assume they exist because you think or were told. If you walk into a new program and they say, hey, here's a binder, here's all the stuff you need, here's the inventory, if you just go based off that inventory or that table of contents and not actually look through all your documents, you might have some trouble when that state inspector actually walks in. We all know that when we assume, we make an ass out of you and me. And you don't want to do it, I don't want to do it. Look at them. Make sure they're accurate. Make sure if you're missing something, inquire about it. A lot of times we see missing documents that were misplaced, were partially damaged, were just completely out of date. They were put in there from way back in the early 2000s, late 90s, and suddenly it's like, hey, it's 2015. You might want to update your discharge permit for your wastewater going through your facility right now. This is something that needs to be updated pretty often. Let's get talking about that. So definitely look at everything. Some other issues that we've seen that I like to talk about a lot is, are you reactive or proactive? Are you someone who always constantly is reacting to a situation? You're not ahead of the game. You're not thinking about, oh, well, if I just introduce these chemicals or introduce this process, it'll be all right. But ultimately, you want to think that through before you even say yes to the entire process. I know a lot of different institutions that go through a really big review from step 1 to step 300 of the different processes that go through and get many, many different people involved. It doesn't mean you need to have every person sitting around a table. That could be 20, 30, 100 people sitting around a table and actually talking about it at once, but making sure you vet it out and make sure you vet out the process to the right people and who it's going to affect. I apologize. Do you work as a team, or are you the white knight? We've seen a lot of cases where the white knight, hey, I'm running my program, I know what's going on, quiz me, I'll tell you what's going on. And I've been delightfully surprised with a lot of answers and in the great conversation that we can have about brand new updated regs. This is how I'm applying it. What do you think? And that is a great way to actually start that conversation, whether that man or that woman is leading the charge in what's going on in their institution and on their site and feeling very confident about it. It's wonderful. And the team aspect might be from 1, 2, 3. I've seen upwards of 20, 25 different people on a team doing a lot of different things to help each other out and really improve the program, which is wonderful. When you first got there, were you given a sinking ship, or were you given this aircraft carrier? Were you given this ultimate site that everything is perfect, everything's good, and you're wondering what to do next? That's exciting. That's the stuff you're like, ooh, I can be innovative. I can do this. I can do that. Awesome. However, when you first show up and it's like, I don't have disposal documents for the past 10 years. Did they do anything? Did my biologicals go out with my biologicals? Did my chemical waste go out where it was supposed to go with chemical waste? Is there a back hole in the backyard somewhere where everybody just knows they just throw stuff? This is stuff that is scary but true, and it's up to you to make that change and make it turn it into something so much better. And there's a lot of places that we can help as well. And then ultimately, who do you call? Really, everybody thinks, who do you call? Let's call the Ghostbusters. Honestly, that's what it is. However, in this case, you want to call these environmental guys, these consultants, these people that you know that can refer you to a bigger program, to something else that can help you work with your program and really make it better. You can do a lot on your own, and that's why you got the job, and that's why everything's going in there, and that is wonderful. But taking it to the next step is definitely the hardest thing that you can do. However, it's something that can get you promoted really easily, impress your boss, and really help out the environment as a whole and the institution. So, speaking of people who to call and what's going on and what resources you have, let's talk about the money, the budget situation. It does really cost money to be in compliance, but it really doesn't have to break the bank. You know, there's a lot of cases out there where you can get a little bit of consulting, a little bit of resource here and there for a lower dollar amount and really suffice your needs for what you're looking at. You don't need an entire 5, 10-person crew to come in and overhaul your site when you're looking at a small biotech, or you're looking at a smaller university, a community college of some sort, and you're looking at it and going, I don't need, $20,000, $30,000 worth of work. I only need a little bit of work to help me going and figure out what's going on up there. So ultimately, it's really finding what you need at that right point in time. Don't overhire, don't overcommit, don't go all in. See what you can get for a little freebie, see what you can get for a little bit here and there just to help you with what you need. Is it just a permit? Is it simply just, hey, help me out, I don't know what I can do with this, can I send it off site? Should I accept this drug, this chemical coming into the actual institution? What's going on? The safety of people's environment is probably one of the things that everybody looks at, because the time and effort to assess all potentially dangerous environments takes time and takes money. A lot of times when the quote-unquote normal processes come through, you're not as worried about them. They've been tried, tested, trued up for a very long time, which is great. The exposure's low. People know what they're doing. They understand it. But potentially when you walk in and say, hey, I want to use this piranha etch, which is made up of sodium hydroxide or an acid and a mixture of a lot of different things, you really start wondering, what's going to happen? Oh, you're going to heat it up. Oh, let's think about this for a minute. Let's take a step back, make sure that you know what's going on. And for those safety portions, you got to have those safety talks. You got to think about it, because the cost of putting a person in the hospital or somewhere else is going to be monumentally worse than actually just having a very small incident, or even preventing that incident completely and spending some money up front to make sure that you're doing the proper safety protocol, air monitoring, equipment change-outs, the right engineering controls, the right PPE controls when you can't engineer it out, and moving forward, and so on and so forth. Fume hoods are constantly looked at for safety of the people and environment in research labs, in clinical spaces, in many, many different areas that use any type of chemical or any kind of process. Fume hoods need to be inspected. They need to be brought into compliance almost at a yearly rate sometimes. And depending on the process, they might work very, very well, or the people who are using them improperly, and they're actually not doing their job, and you're actually going to have a bigger issue. So reviewing, walking around, talking to people, understanding what they're doing and how they're doing it in your more high hazardous situations are something that's going to save you money over the time with a decreased amount of lost time or anything like that you're looking at. The plans and permits, yes, time and effort equals money. Or does it equal a lot of money? It depends on how educated and how resourceful you are on how the permits work and what's going on. I have a lot of people that understand the Clean Air Act completely, and that's wonderful. I've met some people that school me in the Clean Air Act all the time, and I'm like, wow, you knew that a little bit more than I did, or a lot more than I did. All right, I can help with this, I can help with this, but it's not going to be that much. So it's definitely good just to do a little outside checking on what's going on. And between your knowledge and experience, it's huge. Knowledge and experience comes in many different forms, in many different aspects, where you're going through and actually understanding what's going on. Ask your friends. Ask other people that are in similar roles. Network a little bit. Definitely know what's going on. If you're in a hospital situation, you're in a community hospital, work towards a more larger research community in the city, in the suburbs that are just bigger places that you can work with and actually gain experience. It's great stuff to do. If you're at a university, I can think of the Research Triangle, mostly because the NCAA tournament's on right now, and I know most people really would want to get home and watch that today, but thinking of the Research Triangle, you have 3 humongous schools down in North Carolina between Duke, NC State, and UNC that I am sure there's a lot of talk going on between each one of those schools, talking about, hey, what about this plan, what about this, what about this, and actually coming together and communicating between each other and knowing what's going on. But if that doesn't happen as often, there's always an outside source to go through and know what's going on. But Proving by experience and knowledge from fellow experience will help you get smaller numbers passed through the budget. Taking on a humongous task, like bringing in a brand new process, a new principal investigator, a research project that could possibly cause some high hazard situations and really hit the budget big time, talk to other people. There's so many things out there between research and actually doing the work that you can lower the numbers and understand that your budget doesn't have to get full force hit on this, and you can understand what's going on. And ultimately, lastly, with this one is understanding of your site. Know where everything is. Take a walk around. Know where the high hazards are, know where the low hazards are, know where the public is, and so on and so forth. It can definitely save you a lot of time in the long run, understanding what you can and can't do to help. Costs of inventory, waste, and compliance. Simple as that is inventory costs money to complete. It definitely does. But you're meeting the OSHA standard, you're meeting HAZCOM, you know what's going on, and if you keep it up to date, it'll cost less over time. There's a lot of programs out there that are used a lot of times that we see in the biotech industry that control how much chemicals are actually coming into a facility. They can ration them out. They can buy in more bulk quantities and store in other places and create less hazards up in the lab and create less hazards for the environment of the people up in the lab and help save money over time because it's all just coming from one spot. People can share, people can work together, a lot of different concepts with inventory that can go really sky high. Also think about what comes in must go out. So as you're doing an inventory, you got to understand that ultimately when everything comes in, you got to report on everything going out. For example, I mentioned the HAP report, which goes into hazardous air pollutants, and you need to understand who needs to submit this and why they submit it. Within documents that we're going to send out after this webinar, I'm going to include some websites that are definitely really good at understanding what happens, what you got to do, what you don't have to do. Some people just don't have to actually fill out these reports, but they go the extra mile and do it. Sometimes it looks good. Sometimes inspectors are just like, it's good. Just doesn't matter as much. So you got to be careful. But ultimately, the cost of the inventory outweighs the effects of an issue. We had a recent incident over 2 summers ago where we had not only an ETO spill, ethylene oxide, but it was also in an area where there were a lot of other chemicals and a lot of other people that could be in. Ultimately, it turned out to be not that much ETO spilled, but the ETO still set an alarm off. Everybody was still evacuated. The fire department showed up. The news crews showed up. Everybody showed up to see what was going on. And then, as we were standing outside, looking in, debating, all right, this is what we're going to do. This is the plan of attack. We know what we're going to do. We know what we're going to do for the spill response. We got it. We're going to send these people in, so on and so forth. You suddenly see a person walking in the hallway right near the actual spill. And they're not affected by it, but it's the fire department suddenly was like, safety and security, can you get that person out of there? Like just one of those things that there was some bad communication, a little more coordination would have definitely worked and helped out, but it goes back to also knowing the inventory of what's in there. They said, hey, do you also know what's in there? And by a couple clicks of a button, boom, 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 hey, they know what the other chemicals in there. They know what they're going to put their guys into and know, hey, it's not that actually that bad. It's in this hood. All the other chemicals are underneath. There's no reactions, but this is what also there. So be careful of the picric acid that's sitting below it. Watch out for this. Watch out for that. It definitely helps out and saves money and saves time in the long run. Other cost factors that we really like to look at and understand is the size. The size of your institution and or sites or just one small site come into effect big time. When you're looking at a small community-based college or hospital or a small startup biotech, you're looking at smaller costs at running these institutions and running everything that you need. A place with only 1,000 employees or even 500 employees is much different than running a place and understanding a place that has over 10,000 different employees running around, causing issues as they always do. We all know this. But what is in place already? What has been already done? And then what do you really need to know more about? There's some things that everybody feels confident in, like I was talking about before, between a Clear Act permit or wastewater discharge. But are you really comfortable with public safety and understanding, hey, I have a little bit of an impact here. I know we have a security guard here, we have this, we have that, but how confident are you knowing that they know their job, you know your job, and also knowing how to run it throughout there? And then also, how often do you actually scratch your head and wonder, what if this person walks over here, talks to my researcher, can walk right into a lab, and they're in the general public, and walk in, talk, take something, and walk out? It's definitely a question mark. It's something that we're all not really familiar with, but you got to be careful. That's why you walk around and talk, figure out what's going on, and ultimately save a lot of money in your program. Here are some great examples of cost savings when you have a really strong program. These are directly pulled off the USA EPA website. There are many different areas where environmental compliance is not being met, and they found it, and they're fining, and they're cleaning up and figuring out what's going on out there. The last one, a fine, $205,000 for hazardous waste violations. Got to think of what your vulnerabilities are so something like this doesn't walk in. It's only a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate. $205,000 might not be that much. We understand that. However, it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter what the fine is, and it shouldn't matter what's going on. You just don't want to be in the newspaper for actually doing this as well. And in this case, a little bit of background to this story is that they ended up in the newspaper. They ended up losing some profits and losing some customers over it because they were not following proper practices, and it took a while to actually recover from it as well. So let's go through some immediate tactics to help solve some of these problems. A couple case studies I'd like to go through. So a simple conversation started with a very large biotech company. You know, who are you? What are you doing? What kind of research are you doing? Are you doing cancer research? Are you doing specialized disease research? Are you doing animal research? What's going on? So when you get through all that, you go, all right, so you're doing animal research, you're doing a little clinical research, and you're doing some drug approval. You're doing some cool things with drugs. That's what biotechs do. They come up with some really great drugs for all of us. And so what are you doing with all your waste? A very common question that we ask. And they kind of like scratched their heads a little bit, and they said, well, we got some bottles set up. We got nothing goes down the drain. That's what's supposed to go down the drain. And yeah, we're good. We're good. Trash goes out with the trash. We're all set. All right, so do you have satellite accumulation areas? Do you have a storage area, a central accumulation area, a main accumulation area? Do you have any of this? And they're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. So some of these outcomes that came from this is that they set up a satellite accumulation area program and knew what was going on. They set up storage areas to store their waste and send it off properly. Signs and labels, everything, storage, up to date, knew what was going on. Hey, here's the reg, this is what you got to comply with, let's move forward. And then ultimately design safe procedures for moving and handling waste around the entire place. This place is over 50 acres of land that's gorgeous, and you couldn't tell that something like this was happening, but it's set up in a very nice area. You want to keep that nice area, and you don't want to be kicked out. So all these procedures and SOPs were definitely set up in place that helped out. So some quick and easy improvements. Implement regular site walks. Walk around your site. Know what's going on. Understand what's going on. Definitely a good thing. Smile. Talk to people. Understand the processes people are actually completing and doing. You don't have to understand the minute details of their RNA synthesis or synthetic gene growth, but understand that, are they putting themselves in a hazard or are they not? Look for some unmarked containers. Look in the trash receptacle. See if they're putting the right stuff in the right areas. Look at the outside grounds. Is there something coming out of the building or around the building that you're kind of like, huh, what's that color and why is it doing that? Let's talk about that. And then the public interaction. Like I mentioned before, universities and hospitals see this all the time. Public is in and out, students in and out all the time. How's your safety and security? Biotechs, a little more locked up, but every once in a while you find some ways to slip right in past security, and you got to make sure that everything's buttoned up really, really good. Continue to review and update. Your permits and plans are huge. Everything from emergency procedures, your standard operating procedures around everything, your discharge permits, your plans, these are important things to look at. Understand your safety protocols to make sure that you are advising the people in the right direction, but also putting people in a safe environment as well. Agencies. Everybody take a look at these. These are just some of them. These are just the EPA, OSHA. Oh, I've heard of those. I get it. Yep. How about the Water Resource Authority? There's one in Massachusetts that's really strict on a lot of things. In many other cases, in many other states, you might not see that as often. However, the closer I can tell, the closer you get to cities, the more pertinent these types of authorities actually are. Classic example of a state agency, Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection. Get to know them. Get to know how they do, what they're working on. Are you more stringent here? Are you less stringent here? How can I help save some money, stay in compliance, and also continue on and make sure my institution is good? Another case study. You get an unexpected call from your local state agency, your local DEP, your local wastewater commission. I'm coming in to inspect tomorrow and want to review the previous inspection. Well, let's go check everything. Let's go make sure everything's good. Let's go look at main accumulation areas, central accumulation areas, SAAs, paperwork, your permits, your air permits, your generators. This list goes on and on and on and on. The fact is, with this scenario, before I go into some of the actual conclusions that came out of this, is that you knew they were coming. So being prepared, knowing what's going on, knowing what you have is in binders, is on shared drives, is where it needs to be, is huge in understanding that. Some of the outcomes. You know, there's a chance to follow up over with what was going on. In this case, we had a small quantity generator that inquired for some help, that the local authority came in and said, hey, you went over your generator status for 3 months in a row. Can you tell me what's going on? What happened? Did you file a report? I don't see a report in my records, so on and so forth. One of the direct outcomes is that they came back a week later and they noticed, hey, you guys did everything. You guys followed the report. You have follow-up here in front of us. You're showing us what's going on. You disposed of it properly. You did everything. Constructive feedback is make sure you send the report and you get confirmation it was received. Something small like that. You updated your documents. Some SAA issues, very, very common of what's going on. But overall, you buttoned up and cleaned up your universal waste area, and you scheduled work to follow up with the missing discharge sampling reports. Hey, we had these reports that were missing. Ooh, not a good thing. But you followed up. You know how you're going to prove it in the future. You put an SOP in place. We're happy with it. So good outcomes. Another one. When you have people on site, extra resources out there that actually really help you out, keep you up to date with your program. And you can feel confident about the inspection. You know, there's still that initial shock. Oh, you're here? What's going on? You know, focus on what needs to be done. However, when you pass that inspection and you change from years past, that's what the huge, huge portion of the program really is. When we ran through, and a personal connection is that we got a call when many years ago, when it was a Thursday afternoon, and I remember this because it was a Thursday afternoon around 1 o'clock. Hey, you know, the local authorities here? And I go, come on, you're joking with me. No way, no way. It's Thursday afternoon. We all know that it's late in the week. Everybody comes in the beginning of the week. You're joking with me. Get married this weekend. Leave me alone. But it was true. They showed up on site. And we freaked out for a second, went to all those places, and then ultimately passed the inspection. We knew who the local representative was. We could actually have a good conversation with them. They were just as hard as not knowing them, but it was better. There was more integral process of knowing them and knowing what the previous inspection entailed and fixing it. You get the chance to impress that person. Impressing state agencies and inspectors is huge. It helps out with not only future visits, but what's going on right now. And then also, the follow-up, some of the follow-up items. He definitely found some little errors, you know, fixing some SAAs, adjusting some storage arrangements to make sure you communicate the hazards a little better, signs, extra labels, extra this, extra that, huge. And then making a plan to fix a generator because there was an emissions issue. All these things that came through. Ultimately, be honest with yourself. Know what's going on. Understand. Look at it. Don't put it under the rug. Understand. Be honest. Overall, documentation. Make sure you have it. Training. Make sure you train you and your people and you know it well. Is your workload too high? Do you need something else? Do you need a resource once in a while, all the time? Can you hire somebody? Can you not? What it is there and going on. And then your knowledge behind it. Understand that you're not going to know everything. I'm not going to know everything. No one's going to know everything, but knowing where to get it, reference the book, or the internet, proper internet sources, and going from there is huge. Definitely helps. So overall, we went through looking at some of the gaps, the budget, and then also some immediate tactics you can go around and actually do. Remember, walking around your site and asking questions is the first thing you should always do, and inquire. Talk to people. Make sure that they're on your side and they get the buy-in, so when you have to fix something, everybody's really happy about it. Moving forward, observe. Make those changes. Some immediate issues that can improve your program. Do it now. Look at the documentation. Look at what's going on. Look at the compliance. Look at past records. Understand everything about your site. And if it's too much, take a step back. Ask for some extra resources. Secondly, take the survey. We're going to have a survey posted after this in one of the documentations that's going to be sent out that you answer about 10 questions, and it helps you diagnose what a problem could be, even if you think your program is really, really good, which is awesome. Extra supplemental support can always help it improve it just a little bit more. Reach out for more resources when you hit a roadblock. You mentioned before that everybody really is like maybe 1 or 2 times a month, if not every other month, where people are looking for resources. Just understand who to call, know what to do, or at least just get a reference from something and go there and actually use it, which is great. Do you need some sort of customized on-site support program? I'm gonna throw it out there. This is just something my boss, I had to throw in there. This is what Triumvirate can do for you. And I'm trying really hard just to give you a little overview. There's going to be some follow-ups of what's going on. However, when you have supplemental support with fully integrated on-site programs, you can really dig deeper. You can really integrate different people, different opportunities into your program to make it better, make you look better, understand what's efficient, what we can do and what you can do to be more innovative, and look at things that are not just black and white, but look at that process and say, hey, I can save some money, it's more efficient, and it's in compliance. That's awesome. Let's do that. So what makes our people unique and top-notch? We hire the right people. We know what's going on, and we put them on site. They're young. They can lift. They can move stuff. It's great, and they think of all these new ideas because of their schooling behind it as well. And then also, why we might make the biggest difference as a partner in your compliance world? Because we want to help. It's not we're out there just to gain a buck. We want to help. We want to see you succeed, put you on an upper level, and see you push towards the next level, and also use us as a resource whenever possible. So sorry if that was too much of a little bit of a plug, but it's one of my boss's requirements. You got to throw it in there. You got to just throw that. But it's a Triumvirate webinar. We're just throwing a little bit in there, and we're going to have some follow-up to that as well. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. And on to you, Sasha.
Great. All right. So I'm going to open this up to any questions you guys have about your EH&S programs, gaps, and things like that. Again, you can ask a question in the questions pane. So just type it in, and I will ask it to Mike. All right. So First question, someone wants to know how you suggest addressing getting management buy-in for investing in sustainability programs.
A lot of the times when you're addressing sustainability and or management, getting them to actually say yes is showing them a return on investment. A lot of cases we get people come in, clients come in, or potential clients come in and they say, hey, I want to improve my program. However, I know it's going to cost so much money, but I need help doing it. Well, lay out the objectives, lay out, hey, I'm looking to become completely sustainable with all of my waste going out the door. Awesome. Let's see what we can do. We can go here. We can go to many different disposal areas. We can offer these types of costs here, here, and here. No cookie cutter will fit. So therefore, looking at a return on investment, finding out what your objectives are, what can happen, and what you can save in the end is going to be huge. And having that safety component in there is going to be even better because over a long period of time, less people get hurt, there's less ergonomic issues, all that. You're going to get the buy-in from your management that it's a good thing to do. It's going to help you, it's going to help the people around you, and help the environment around you by being sustainable as well.
Great. Next question. Someone says the main issue at their organization is cultural. How do you convince people that safety and other priorities are like that are important?
Changing a culture is probably the hardest thing that you have to do. And what we found is that in some places there are very integrated environmental health and safety programs that will go above and beyond for their people, and they get along extremely, extremely well. When you see that, it's easier to start implementing little changes at a time. So ultimately, step one, implement small changes at first. Have some really good areas that like you like them, test these little changes. Then have them help you promote a new culture for changing what's going on. 2, don't bite off too much of the apple right away. If you try and take a bite of the whole thing, it's probably going to fail because culture dictates what's going on around there. Many examples include, where you're ordering your chemicals from, to where you're throwing your trash, to, hey, can you help me out by just putting your chemicals away at night and teaching your research people what to do and getting them to actually do it. It's hard in some cases, I'm not going to lie, because as a system, culturally, they want to do it their way. But it's how nice you are, it's how integrated you can be, it's how much you can show them that it's a benefit to their program and benefiting what they're going to do, they're going to buy in off of it as well.
Great. Someone wants to know how to know when it's time to make a hire from a contractor or when to make a full-time hire.
It all depends on what you ultimately want to do. I'll give you 2 scenarios. One scenario, you start off by hiring a contractor because you need help in a very small way. You want help on your permitting. So you hire a specialized person to come in, they help you with their permitting, say once or twice a month, help you supplement what's going on. Then you find out that there's some routines and some other things that are outside the permitting that you need help with. Well, bring them in for a little bit more time. Maybe it's twice a week now, and then you start adding it up. Depending on what you want to do, you can keep bulking it up, keep adding it up, adding more people, adding more time, which is good. However, you're looking at a cost prohibitive center, more or less. So depending on your budget, depending on when you want to make that switch. Example number 2 is that we were actually working with a pretty large institution, and we had a person on site 5 days a week, 40 hours a week. And it's not cheap for that kind of stuff. It really isn't. But there came a point where it was just, they're here all the time. They know what's going on. They're updated with everything. We have a really good relationship with you. Can we potentially hire this person on or really work with them to move forward and go on with what we need to do?
And in that case, that company actually hired our employee on after a little bit of talking, negotiating, figuring all that out, obviously. But there's a switch. There's definitely a switch when you feel that the cost doesn't outweigh the benefit at that point, and then you can internalize some of it. And not necessarily hire that person per se, but work with them to find the right person to get in there. And it's funny because a lot of times that when you decide to make that switch and decide that your workload just dictates a full-time hire or an FTE, a full-time employee, it's usually a cost thing. And you look at the cost, you figure out the people, and a lot of time it's a ex-contractor that really wants a job at a more consistent place, and they're like, yeah, I'll work here, this is great. And then you get experience, you get the connection, and you get to build the faith from there as well.
Great. I actually think that's it for questions. So unless anybody has other questions, I think are going to close out the webinar. So Mike, if you want to switch to the next slide. All right. So I just want to thank everybody for attending the webinar. We will send everyone an email with a copy of the presentation along with a recording later today. The email will also have a link to a survey asking you to rate this webinar. So if everybody could fill that out, that would be great. In the upcoming week, you'll also receive an offer for an initial assessment for a gap analysis at your organization. So feel free to fill out the form for that, and we'll do that for you. And if you are interested in attending any of our future webinars, you can go to www.triumvirate.com/training/events. I will also send you a link to that in the email, so no need to write that down, as well as the answers to the Q&As from today. All right, thanks everybody for coming. Bye.